Beijing, there's an old historic street, one of Beijing's ancient network of alleyways. These alleyways are known in the local language as a Hutong, and on Nanluo Guxiang, there's a small shop called Beijing Postcards. Visitors to the shop can buy postcards and prints, and the owner of the shop is on hand to talk. When he begins to speak with his guests about Beijing stories, he could talk for hours.
This is the Tiananmen Gate, but on it you don't have Mao Zedong. You have Jiang Jieshi, Chiang Kai-shek, because from 45 to 48 he actually hung directly on the Tiananmen Gate.
I'm from Denmark and I went to China the first time in 1996.
From his first visit in December 1996, Lars found Beijing instantly fascinating.
I was deeply fascinated by China because so much was going on and it was so extremely different from what I knew. So it started a cold winter day in December 96 at the Beijing Jan.
After that, he went to Copenhagen University to read Chinese. In 2004, Lars decided to settle down in Beijing. Lars has a special Chinese name, Wu Sangui. In Chinese history, Wu Sangui is not thought of as a good person.
Actually, I did not choose this name myself. It was a good friend of mine because I was reading a book about the Qing dynasty. And then there was a lot about Wu Sangui, and then he started calling me Wu Sangui. And then I realized that all the people, they were just laughing when he did this, so I kept the name.
Many Chinese are curious about his name, and so it's a good way to break the ice. During his 9 years in Beijing, Lars's favorite thing is telling people history stories.
Like I said, it's the best place in Beijing to see the Forbidden City. I think if you choose between the Forbidden City and here, you should definitely go here because you don't get the same overview from the outside. We have found some poetry that describes how the water was actually just outside the door or the entrance to this temple. You can see the two beams up here. Those homes that have the highest status, they would have 4. So this person living in here would be kind of a mid-level.
Even to local Beijingers.
我们注意到的是你的这边很低，对吧？ You can see the road has kind of absorbed half of the Minder, would actually become higher and higher, and suddenly the house would be much lower than the road.
Except telling stories, his most important hobby is collecting old photographs. To start with, Lars had not thought of turning old pictures into postcards, but while collecting, he noticed some interesting patterns.
Like the pictures we collect are documenting China. You can find a lot of old pictures in China of people like portraying themselves, just standing there and 笑不露齿, or like in Chinese it means like that you won't show your teeth, and so as a Westerner it's always a little bit strange to look at these pictures because you can feel that people, they're just standing there and nearly thinking about not smiling, and to us that's very strange.
Just as an interest, Lars kept collecting old pictures. He collected them from Panjie Yuan, an antiques market, and Chinese and European auctions. Lars's photo collection grew and grew. Mostly in black and white, these images illustrate how life used to be in the city. And then he hit on a big idea.
Our idea is that every product we make is a window. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, we could design a table, we could make a fan, we could make a postcard. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to be a window to history. You can propagate through anything.
In 2006, Lars and his friend Simon opened this small shop. Although the floor space is only 7 square meters, they have nearly 10,000 old pictures, and many of them are very rare.
We find most of these pictures not in China. It's interesting. That is because a lot of this like photographic material was made or taken by foreigners. So when they left China, they also brought all of this back home.
The old pictures are difficult to get, so most of them are 10 RMB a piece, which is a little pricier than usual postcards, which are 2 or 3 RMB a piece. Many visitors come just to look without buying anything. Lars, however, doesn't care about this.
That doesn't matter because we think that a big part of what we want to do is like to be this bridge between the past and the present and the Chinese China history and the Western China history. So in this way, we will actually be we are actually able to gather a lot of information.
Lars can't make any real money from the small shop, but to him enjoying Beijing's old stories with others is the most important thing. The shop's history conversations are mostly agreeable, but sometimes things can get a little more fiery.
Sometimes we can get into, I wouldn't say quarrels. They can be like, no, it wasn't like this. This must be Photoshop or something like this. And then, and when you engage with people like that, I think the challenge is to kind of realize that history is sensitive, and then engage in a discussion in a good and fruitful way for both parts. Because there's nothing worse than a discussion of no, it was 1918. No, it was 1919. That kind of discussion, because it doesn't really hold any significant knowledge, really. So we try to avoid that and just talk about the background of the picture.
Now the shop has become the go-to place to discuss Beijing history between Lars and other people. However, Lars has to do other jobs for rent money.
These 3 pieces of architecture are the ones that define Beijing to me. The Tiananmen Gate, maybe you've also seen that today, and the old railway station just next to the museum. Pretty much everything else has been torn down and rebuilt, or at least changed a lot.
I think it is very interesting because he makes the history understandable.
I think they're very interesting. It's very important for me to understand Beijing, and he helps me to understand it, to understand about the history, to understand about nowadays, about the present and about the future.
Gradually, Lars's reputation has grown, and many politicians and embassy staff employ him to be their guide.
We've also done translation and shown like big politicians around, like the Prime Minister of Denmark and the Mayor of Copenhagen, and we've also done a lot of ambassadors, and we've done, let me see, like the Foreign Minister of Switzerland. That kind of thing.
Aside from guide and translation work, Lars and his business partner held 2 photo exhibitions in 2011 and 2012 where many Beijingers were amazed by his knowledge of Beijing's history.
It kind of connects the pictures in a new way. Another thing we did was like also focusing on the city gates. What functions did the city gates originally have? And we realized that the city gates originally had like a coal gate, a water gate, a military gate, a gate for excrement, a timber gate, a tax gate, that kind of thing. And when you start to dig out these stories, it all becomes very fascinating.
As an obsessed history fan of Beijing, there are many things that concerns Lars when it comes to the city's heritage.
Sometimes you forget to preserve. And we have like a saying in Beijing postcards, like a kind of a slogan, and it is, how can you learn from experience if memory is lost? And that's where I am a little bit worried sometimes for Beijing, because I think that when you tear down old architecture, you also like extinguish memory. And sometimes I think the worst thing you can do is like tear down old architecture and then rebuild it like you think it was, because I think this is done a lot in Beijing, and I think it's a shame.
On top of the bookcase, originally you had a lion. As is obvious, it's not there anymore. Originally it had kind of a protecting function, just like you would see big stone lions outside the imperial palace. You would have smaller ones outside people's homes to kind of protect the home, but they're not there anymore.
and that's because they were smashed during the Cultural Revolution.
So is this communist area? I see there's the star, the communist stars on this drain pipe.
Yeah, this area is not especially communist, you could say, but after 49, I would say most of the courtyards were taken over by communist organizations in this area, and especially the military took over a lot of the courtyards, so you can see some very significant communist kind of symbols here on the drain pipe.
Over the past 9 years that Lars has been in Beijing, he's seen his adopted home change rapidly.
You realize now in Beijing that this old architecture has got a lot of soul. It's very valuable to the city. So I think that it's, I think I'm conflicted. I think, you know, I like to be here in Beijing. I love Beijing. I love the development, but I'm slightly worried about some areas. You know, development and the chaos of Beijing is also one of the reasons that I like to be here.
A history buff like Lars, whose business focuses on Beijing's historical stories, should have many stories. So what about his own story? In Chinese history, Wu Sanggui's favorite concubine was Chen Yuan, a famous Ming Dynasty beauty who marked the end of that period in Chinese history. Has Lars already found his own Chen Yuan?
No, I haven't, but I hope I will. I guess my plan is just like keep on digging for more stories in Beijing.
Trust in me when I say